Okay.
You ready?
Fine. Let's talk to Setuf in Spain, who promised to call back and has. Welcome back to the show, Setuf.
Hi, V. Hi, Eric. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good.
Doing good. So is people have been arguing about this and debating it in the comments, and did you just switch the first letter and the last letter of fetus? Or is that your actual name and this just happens to be an amazing coincidence? I mean, it's okay if you're not using your real name. That's understandable, but I gotta know.
Great question, Eric. Thanks so much for asking. Yeah, it is an acronym of fetus.
Okay.
We figured.
Okay. But you know what? It's settling a lot of bets, so I had to get that out of the way.
Cool.
All right. Well,
I just wanted to say before we begin, I really liked your first call. I was listening in, and I can relate a lot because this is like my third week calling into these shows. My third week. And I've been getting a lot of hate for my opinions and arguments, and people not attacking the arguments, but trying to attack me from accusing me to be lying about my gender, to these kind of things. Or even on our last video last week, I had somebody say in the comments that you guys shouldn't even have granted me the respect that we had in the call, and I just found it amazing. So I really just wanted to share that about the first call you had. I could relate with that.
well, yeah, I think in general it's a good idea because the way that I interpret when you attack a person is not the argument, is that you don't have a good argument for the argument itself.
Yeah.
And you're relying on attacking the person instead because that's easier. Of course, that's not always the case, but I try to avoid that when I can. So let's continue a respectful conversation today. Let's continue our call from last week. We talked about abortion last week, and I'm assuming you want to continue that.
Yeah, I would like to. That's fine with you guys.
Yeah, let's start in.
Cool. So just to get everything back to on the same page, is it correct that in our last call we had agreed that during the pregnancy there is a time where the fetus becomes a being, which should be morally considered, or deserving of moral consideration, rather? So what I'm looking for. Is that correct? Or?
Kind of. I think I just want to make sure that we're clear. I think that being is kind of a useless term to use. I think that it's emotionally evocative. And so I think I can understand why you would want to use that word. I am fine for the sake of this argument to grant that after a certain point in the gestation, fetus has the properties of a being, and that at that point it does become, a lot more of a moral kind of internal struggle with the pregnant person, wondering what to do if, they're in a position where they cannot continue carrying that fetus to term. So yes, but let's start there.
Okay, so that's the point where I want to continue it from then. So if this fetus is deserving of moral consideration at some point, would we agree that somebody would need a very good justification to kill this fetus?
Again, we're trying really hard to make sure that we're finding common ground, and using loaded language makes that difficult. So let's avoid. I'm gonna ignore that for now. Let's try and avoid loaded language as much as possible. Setuf, I'm gonna do that on my end as well, so we can get down to brass tacks here. I think that in general, if somebody is considering a late-term abortion, which is, I believe, anywhere from 1% to 3% of abortions that happen, then the only reasons that would be the case is if there was a justification that their doctors believed was necessary. So either the fetus itself would not survive outside the womb, and this is a merciful thing to do because otherwise it would suffer a lot for an extended amount of time after being born, or the mother or or parent is, possibly going to die if they do bring this fetus to term. So yes, I think that in general, what we see in the real world is that the minority of abortions that happen are late-term abortions, only a few %. And in those situations, it becomes a conversation with a doctor about, is this the right option? Are there any other options for me? And if not, then unfortunately, the only option for that person is to have an abortion, because that person probably wanted that kid at that point.
Yeah.
Do you think that
Cool.
I got to ask Setuf in that example that V just gave of non-viable pregnancy or risking the life of the mother? Do you feel like an abortion for those reasons is moral or immoral?
Let's just say risking the life of the mother, for instance, I would see no sense in risking that, and which would basically kill both. I would see absolutely no sense in somebody saying, no, she must, the host must keep pregnant, even though their life is at risk, because if they die, the fetus die, and what's the good of that? So I would find it as justified in that instance.
Okay, so the reason I ask is because a lot of people who I've interacted with have said that abortion, no matter what reason, is immoral always. And I didn't want to strawman you, and I wanted to ask you if you have a more nuanced view that you're willing to go, okay, there are moral considerations that can come into play. And it sounds like there are. So I have way fewer questions than I was going to anyway. Back to V.
All right. So we've kind of agreed that in certain situations, when that is the only option available, or when that is the option that the doctor suggests, then we do wrestle maybe internally with the morals and the ethics of it, but it isn't the worst thing. It isn't a bad thing. So where are we disagreeing here? Okay.
Maybe because for you guys, it's clear as day that this fetus only deserves, I don't want to strawman you as well, so correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe where we are disagreeing is that for you guys, it's clear as day that the fetus only becomes something with subjective experience in the third trimester, and that is not my position. That is why I actually want to talk about the morality, regardless of the time, because if we can establish that it is indeed immoral if the fetus is having a subjective experience, then we can go to the conversation of when does this happen? Because last time, Eric, you told me to check out this case, Roe versus Wade.
Roe versus Wade.
And the way I understood, it, I did check it out, by the way. And
good.
The way I understood it is basically about viability of the fetus, right? And going deeper in this, and I might have misunderstood it, but basically what viability means, it means that at this week 25, 50% of the fetuses would survive outside the womb, which is why it becomes a more problematic area. But in my view, the week before, the host can terminate without any consideration or needing any doctors or anything like this extra to like you guys said in the third trimester, they can do it. But my position is, what is the difference between the fetus in week 25 and week 24? Say, instance, in week 24, the survival rate would be 40%. Does this mean this life is not worth not terminating?
Well, that's a subjective point that's going to vary from person to person. So I wouldn't assume, from one person to the next. But it's important that you read that, and especially if you're having conversations with people from the United States, because this show, about 60 to 70% of our viewers are in the United States. And so when we're having this debate, when we're having this conversation, it is couched in that history. And that's how people are used to talking about it. And you're not in the United States. And because of that, references are going to go over your head or, completely past you, and they're not going to be productive conversations. So I'm glad that you read about Roe v. Wade and what happened there. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think you're right, Setuf, that there is that is the fundamental disagreement between us, and the difference is, okay, well, why are we drawing the lines that we draw? And there are reasons that it is as ambiguous as it is. One of them being it is unethical to have experiment on pregnant people, and so there are things where I know Ben is going to be on the chat on the call later and just absolutely blow this out of the water. But my point is that can be reduced to a scientific question, and that can be reduced to a religious or moral question. And I think that a lot of the time when we have conversations, we talk about the religious or moral conversation and the philosophical way, and we use all these analogies, the trolley problem and the violinist argument and all of these examples to try and contend with the moral side of things. But if we look at the scientific side of things, then we're better able to see, okay, well, this is what the body does at this stage in life, and we have to draw that line somewhere. So you very well might draw the line at 24 weeks or 23 weeks, but the law here draws it at 25. And for a country that has more abortion access than we do, they might draw the line elsewhere. So I respect your right to draw that line for yourself wherever you would like it to be. My only concern is that a lot of the time people tend to say, well, I've drawn the line in the right place for my reasons, and therefore you should draw that line there for my reasons as well.
That's the practical side of it.
Right. So practically, I respect your right to believe whatever you want about the beingness of fetuses and when they become viable. But why does that impact, or why should that impact how other people talk to their doctors and make medical decisions is the question here.
Yeah, and that's couched in the fact that we're living in a place, V and I are in Texas right now, and in Texas, you could, if you, let's say, had a miscarriage, be accused of having an abortion and be in legal trouble.
Somebody in South Carolina, I believe, is jailed for 4 years for having a miscarriage. First-degree manslaughter is what they called it. Right. Yeah. And I think we're on the same page there, that's not helpful, but that tends to be where the conversation goes when we frame it as, well, I am morally right, and I should be able to dictate for you what you do with your body.
Yeah. Do you think that your moral views around abortion should be legislated? And if so, how do you prevent what's going on here? Because it's not a slippery slope for us. It just happened. Right. So what's your view around that? Is this just armchair philosophy, or do you think that we have a duty to legislate that for other people to have to deal with?
Well, okay, so you guys said it quite a lot, but just to answer Eric's question quickly, I do believe that we should legislate avoiding I don't want to say killing, but the termination of innocent beings without a very, very good justification to take the life of that being. I think we should legislate that. That is my position. And I just want to address this thing about subjectivity of when something becomes a being. I mean, yes, there are the philosophical questions, the religious questions, and so on. But I think we, or you guys as skeptics at least, should agree that we should follow the science, right? And so from my research, what I found out about fetuses is that their first brain activity starts in week 6 of pregnancy, okay? I'm not saying that they're necessarily a being at that point, but I'm just saying they're starting at week 6. And just a few weeks later, the fetus can actually be observed yawning, stretching, thumb sucking, and so on. And I'm no brain expert, but for me, that seems like not such a big difference to a newborn who stretches, yawns, and sucks their thumb and so on.
Okay. I do want to address this because that's if you are getting that information from somewhere, that is inaccurate. It would not be possible to yawn and suck a thumb at 10 weeks because those things have not developed yet. But I also want to point out that this is actually a really big problem, Setuf, and this isn't your research that's like, I'm not saying that you were looking for biased sources or anything because I'm not going to make that assumption. Yeah. But I have tried to do research on fetal development online, and it's really difficult to find accurate representation of what is happening because either A, it's for expecting parents who want to see their little baby and like they make it into something that it doesn't actually look like at that point.
It might look like a tadpole and
right. Or it's actually like there is a lot of difficulty in actually finding accurate week-by-week representation of what happens during fetal development that is not swayed by a bias towards, oh, this is a baby, this is a being, this is a fully formed thing right away, either because of political reasons or because of, just catering to a specific demographic who like that. So I would push back a little bit on that and encourage you to maybe do a little bit more digging. And if you find really good resources, definitely send them my way because I'm also looking for that. But I think if we're going to be going down the scientific route, I really want to jump on the next call because we have a medical student who is practicing in surgery right now, and he actually wants to talk about this as well. So Setuf, listen in to this next call and maybe give us a call back once you've synthesized that information and we can continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Cool. Would you guys say that this would be classified as a being if I can send you information that at 10 weeks old, it's sucking its thumb?
Again, we have a little weirdness around being, and me personally, I'm also willing to grant that shrimp are beings. And so there's a lot of
beings, sorry?
Shrimp.
Or like fish.
Shrimp.
Yeah.
And so, of course they're things.
Yeah. And
of course they are. Yeah.
And I don't have moral compunctions about eating them. So it gets real icky real quick, but I'll do my best, and we're going to do our best to approach this honestly and openly.
Yeah. Thanks for calling in, Setuf.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. People have said, especially in the comments, that when it comes to these conversations, women have the right to pregnant people have the right to terminate a pregnancy for whatever reason they want, and that's the end of discussion. And while that's understood, there are a lot of people who haven't had any kind of conversation around it, haven't considered or thought about it. And the fact that we have this platform, the fact that we answer the same questions over and over, they're answered for us. I mean, if somebody calls in and says they want to talk about the teleological argument for the existence of God, do you think we haven't answered that? We do. But the reason we do it isn't for us. It's for the people who are watching that can benefit from seeing those conversations had without the vitriol.
Right. And also, I do want to bring up a couple of other things along that line. I agree to an extent. Like, if you don't have a uterus, then you should not be deciding what happens in a uterus. Yeah, cool, good. I agree. Unfortunately, the reality is, A, we live in a society that most of the leaders in our society do not have uteruses. And so we have a problem if we say we're not even going to talk to you guys about it because you don't even get to have the conversation. Meanwhile, they're the ones making the laws, right? The least we can do is try and get people on our side regardless of their anatomy, right? But the other thing that a lot of this rhetoric kind of forgets is that a lot of people with uteruses are anti-abortion, right? A lot of people are anti-choice who also are women or people with uteruses. Yep. So there is that dual stuff as well, because if somebody with a uterus is listening to this show and their views are changing, Well, we want that too, especially if we're going to say only people with uteruses can make these decisions, right? So yes, and let's be more nuanced here.
Yeah. And if you're pulling your hair out, we're having the conversation, so you don't have to.
Yeah, believe me, I'm sitting on my hands trying not to scream, but like we're gonna get through this, and the leveler ahead that we can keep, the more people will be interested in actually having a conversation.
And if somebody wants to and you don't want to have the conversation, send them the link to the video and see what benefit they had, and see if they're able to have a more nuanced conversation because they were able to engage with it in a non-vitriolic way.
Absolutely.